And welcome to Gridiron Nation on TSN, everyone. I'm Jim Mullin. He's Gord Randall, who happens to be the coach of, well, we'll say it, Canada's favorite high school football team for people that watch this show, the Sullivan Stars. How are your Sullivan Stars doing these days?
Struggled a bit out of the gate. Tough start to the season for us. We went 0-4 out of the gate. Had some tough opponents on the schedule, but managed to get into the win column this past weekend. So hopefully that's the start of some positive momentum for us. We actually have a long trip up to Salmon Arm to play a game this week, so that should be an interesting one for us.
So you're 1-4. Let's do the math on that. That equals 5, just like the Stateside 5. In at 5, it's not his biggest game of the year, but he still makes plays, game in and game out. It is Ty Benefield for Boise State, the native of Vancouver, with 3 solo tackles, a pass breakup, and a fumble recovery in a 62-30 win over Utah State. Mississauga's Jet Elad back into the 5 from UNLV. 8 solo tackles, 10 overall, a pass breakup, and 1.5 TFL. Unfortunately, the Rebels come up short in overtime against Syracuse. This is a weekly occurrence for Longueuil, Quebec's Daryl Jabome. 8 tackles in all, 7 of them solos, a sack, and a TFL in a 1-score loss to Nebraska. Too many close losses for our guys in the 5 this week, but great performances. Keelan White is another example. 11 receptions, 163 yards, and a touchdown. The longest is only 26 yards, so he was productive. But a 55-48 overtime loss to Weber State was not the cherry on top. And the Hoosiers are all about football, especially with this guy at the controls. Curtis Rourke, 25 of 33, 380 yards passing. That was the top performance by a Division I quarterback on the weekend. Also added 3 TDs in a 41-24 win over Northwestern. He is 5th in passing in the NCAA. Okay, you know the 5. We're going to talk about them later. I want to talk about the weekend that was, and if we're going to have any more weekends like that this year. Alabama Vanderbilt. That's why we love college football, isn't it? And it wasn't just the game itself. Maybe we love college football even more because of what happened once the final whistle went. The goalposts come down, the students rip it from the stadium, they go on a 2-mile track and dump the goalposts in the river, and there's news coverage of it all through the state. Take us through that game, through the reaction, but most of all, Gord, take us through that entire weekend and what it means for college football at this stage.
Yeah, well, we'll start with Alabama Vanderbilt and a game that Vanderbilt fans were obviously the most excited about, and second most excited was probably Washington Huskies fans watching their former coaching staff choke that game away. And I mean, who could have predicted? I love, like, Vanderbilt at the end of the game after the final whistle. They played back an interview from a couple years ago. Nick Saban, no longer the coach at Alabama, but the quote was, the only SEC stadium that you're not afraid to play in is Vanderbilt because you usually have more fans there than they do. And they leaned into that one over and over again. I love everything about it. Vanderbilt is the least likely team in the entire conference to pull off this upset. Vanderbilt's historically been a team that has really struggled to compete on the football field in the SEC, and feels like in this era of expansion and mega conferences, kind of feels like just a legacy piece in the SEC to a lot of people. And then all of a sudden they do something like this. You know, a game like this would have been incredible time in any college town in the nation, but the fact that it happens to be in freaking Nashville, which is one of the best party towns in the country anyway, it just makes it so much better, right? Diego Pavia, by the way, the transfer from New Mexico State, a guy who's a great rags to riches story. Cam Ward's probably a little better on the whole, but he's right there with them. He was incredible in this game, the quarterback for Vandy. I love, we also found out that the SEC fined, so if the students storm the field at the end of the game, Arkansas got to face this weekend too, but they have to pay a $250,000 fine directly to the other team's athletic department. So both Vandy and Arkansas had to pay that fine. The quote from the Arkansas AD on that, Hunter Yurachek, was, quote, worth every penny. So Just everything about college football culture, and especially SEC culture, was just perfect with that game. And that brings me to the bigger picture of the weekend, which was that this is one of the craziest weekends of college football I can recall having watched in my life. I don't feel like I'm overstating that. We saw numbers 1, 2, 4, 10, 11, and I think also 12 went down. I'm just going off the top of my head here. I think I might be adding one extra one in there somewhere. And then we see number 8, Miami, who barely survives in a game that finishes at 2 a.m. on their home campus with a 25-point second half comeback against Cal in the spotlight game of the evening in what should now be called ACC After Dark. So just all sorts of crazy stuff happening left and right. And I was messaging multiple friends on Saturday going, I am completely overwhelmed right now, because not only is all that going on, I mean, I'm also a baseball guy, so there's also overlapping baseball playoff games going on, a lot of which were incredible on Saturday too. And it was just sports nirvana through and through and through. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it is truly the best time of the year when we've got all of this going at the same time. One of the things that was fantastic as well over the weekend was the performance once again of Curtis Rourke. Yeah, he was the top performing passer out of all the top 25 teams. The Cinderella story continues at Indiana. When is the clock going to strike midnight, or is it?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of teeth left in that schedule, right? But I think Indiana has earned their way into being treated as much more than a novelty at this point in the season, and something that's to be legitimately contended with. And obviously Curtis Rourke is at the center of that, but we also should focus some spotlight on Curt Cignetti, their head coach. This guy has been a winner everywhere he's gone, from the D3 level all the way up. He had James Madison winning 90% of their games in his tenure there before moving up to Indiana, and has immediately made the bump here at Indiana. And what I have particularly loved about this is not just that they're winning, but that Cignetti is clearly pushing the culture in the right direction as well, putting out an open call to Indiana fans before their game last week against Maryland, saying, look, I know you have to study, I know you care about academics, but take the 3 hours off, because we think we're going to win this game anyway, but we are going to need you behind us so you can be part of that with us as well. I love messages like that, and I love him basically saying, look, I know that we think of ourselves as a basketball school, but I'm here to tell you we're a football school now too. And so they're going to be a fun one to watch for the rest of the year. We're obviously biased, but they've put themselves in the position of being one of the must-watch teams in the country, and we're hammering it to death. But I can tell you guys that on the south side of the border, they're also hammering the storyline to death until it runs out of steam, if it ever does.
Keelan White will say that he got the Gridiron Nation bounce after doing an interview with us last week, just to attract more athletes to come onto the show for further interviews. What a performance. Unfortunately, it was a surprise loss to Weber State, and that's going to have some negative impacts on that Montana program. But Keelan White continues to impress, Gord.
Yeah, I mean, in his interview with you last week, he talked about how, you know, their ambitions are bigger ambitions, right? They got all the way to the national final last year, and they had to reload and lost some key guys, but he felt like they were all pulling the same direction and with their eyes on that bigger picture. And the reality of the loss to Weber State is that bigger picture isn't gone now. It's just they're going to have to tighten up and have their work cut out for them moving forward. But you know, they're one of those teams, like the Montana State rivalry game that'll finish their regular season is always they always have one eye on that. And as long as you're high enough in the Big Sky, you're going to make that playoff tournament. And of course, we're going to see it at the FBS level for the first time this year. But at the FCS level, you got that long-standing playoff tournament where you just get a ticket to the dance and you can go as far as you can take yourself. So they're still well positioned for that. And Keelan going well over 100 yards to the touchdown in this game, you know, continues to be maybe not the clear one in that passing attack, but certainly the 1A with Sawyer Racanelli also having an excellent season for them as well. So it's all good news personally for Keelan White. And with the Grizzlies, I think they're still in a good position to bounce back despite the slip up, which surprisingly, I should point out, was in Missoula as well. So not just an upset loss, but an upset loss at home in a pretty tough environment. So an impressive win for Weber State there.
Hey, let's talk about the FCS playoff system just for a second, because, you know, I love the bowl games that exist out there. Sometimes I love the silliness of them, like the Pop-Tarts Bowl. But, the FCS playoff system, I love the structure of it. I love the run to it. It almost feels like a Stanley Cup-like version of a playoff system, as you have to go through a long march and be perfect all the way through to the end. I think it's probably one of the most highly underrated playoff systems in sport that we know of in North America. What are your thoughts on that?
It is. It's a lot of fun, and you get to see matchups all over the country. You get to see teams that maybe had a couple hiccups on their schedule still have a chance to get it all right at the best time and make their way through to the end, as opposed to the FBS, which, again, that dynamic is changing right now. But for the longest time has felt like you had to be walking on glass and be pretty much perfect all the way through, or your shot was done. And so that's one of the things, is that it opens up so many more opportunities for teams that are out there. There's a couple shortcomings in the system for me, though. The biggest one for me personally, actually, is that the Ivy League doesn't take part in it. And so that, to me, just cost it just a little bit of legitimacy. And I think there's another conference or two that also does not participate, and the HBCUs also are kind of arms length participation as well. I would love for it to be a more inclusive full playoff structure rather than this kind of hit and miss that they have. And then the other thing is that, like, to get all the way to the end, you basically have to play a game every week from here on out until January. And that is tough, and something that not even FBS teams do. So it's a grind to get through as well. And I would love to find some way for that to be eased off, because it's interesting, like FCS guys that are coming out of FCS schools jumping straight to the NFL. I heard a comment from one evaluator a while back where he said, well, these guys have actually played 16, 17 game seasons if they're going to, say, North Dakota State, as opposed to going to Alabama, which I found to be a really interesting quote.
Yeah, 16 games, 17 game season. You need 16 wins to win the Stanley Cup in the playoffs. Hate to draw the hockey analogy in, but it is a similar grind. When we come back, we will talk all about U Sports. Stick around. And welcome back, everyone, to the nation. It is U Sports time. Dashawn Stephens joining us from PRSVRE Media this week. Dashawn, welcome.
Jim, Gord, great to be here. Thanks for having me again.
Hey, Panda Game was a blast. Manitoba lost their first game. Montreal woke up from a slumber. But Dashawn, for me, maybe the most significant game, and it's a bit of a sleeper, was Guelph's win over Windsor. Take us through the game and take us through the implications for the OUA.
Yeah, for the Windsor Lancers, they had a great start to the season, starting off 5-0. But I think for a lot of us, we all knew that it was going to come down to what we thought was their last two games of the season, which would be against Western and Laurier. But the Guelph Griffins obviously have had a great season so far. And so with them being a top 10 team, this was going to be another big game for Windsor. And really and truly what it came down to was Guelph being able to move the ball on offense, being able to move the ball on the ground, and then being able to make big plays when it mattered the most, which has really been the definition of their season. This Guelph team under Mark Soria has really turned around, tightened things up, found their groove on offense, and have gone back to playing good football defensively. So for the Windsor Lancers, obviously wasn't an easy task going into Guelph's homecoming. And I think a big thing for the Windsor Lancers also is who's their quarterback. They've had 4 different people play quarterback for them this season. 3 different players came in at quarterback during the game. So for the Windsor Lancers, we're going to find out who they really are over the next 3 weeks. It's not a panic button type of loss to lose to the Guelph Griffins. They're a great football team, and to lose in the final seconds, in the final minute of the game, a great way to go down. But I think we'll find out who they are over the next 2 weeks against Laurier and the Western Mustangs.
Gord, does this reorder the OUA, or does this actually push things back into the old order?
Yeah, I mean, I think it shuffles things a little bit. It was funny, right? Like last week we had that segment where we talked about the looming second place team, and we talked at length about Western, and then just kind of threw in at the end there, oh, and by the way, Windsor's also 5-0. And I could just hear the ghosts screaming into the abyss as we were talking about it. But the truth was, as Dashawn alluded to, Windsor, their best win was probably a home win against Queens. Like, they hadn't really played anybody to this point that would force us to truly take them seriously as a top-tier contender. And Guelph, meanwhile, I had felt had kind of been lurking in that second tier throughout the season. A few strong performances, came up just short against Laurier a couple of weeks earlier, and felt like they were right in that game as well. And then in this one, I think with the boost of that homecoming crowd, they explode. Just under 500 yards of offense is a great showing for them. And that defense it started to sag a little bit late. Like they let Windsor right back into that one when it looked like it might have been home and cool, and just hung on to it. But that's a fun team that has shown that it might be able to create the offensive fireworks it needs to compete with the top tier. So they're all of a sudden one of the most intriguing teams in the conference, if not the most intriguing. But I would agree with you, generally speaking, Jim. Laurier established themselves in week 3 as the top team with their defeat of Western, and Western is very clearly the number 2 at this point in time, and I think that's not a controversial statement, even less so than it was last week. So it maybe is falling back into that clear top 2 and then kind of the next group, but this was an interesting result, certainly for Guelph, and a team that I'm going to keep an eye on moving forward here.
And if I could just add on to the tail end of that, I want to say one thing. I think this win for the Guelph Griffins solidifies them as that team that nobody wants to face in the playoffs. They might be that team that might be able to pull off an upset again in the playoffs, and who knows, they might be able to find their way playing in the Yates Cup. So I think for this win for the Guelph Griffins, huge win for the program, and I think it brings them back into Yates Cup conversation. No one's going to want to face them in the playoffs for sure.
Gord, last week we talked about big events in youth sports, and probably the biggest event on an annual basis in any sport is the Panda Game. They proved it again in Ottawa, another 24,000 there, to see a game that came down to the final play once again. I don't know how they do it year in, year out. There's the odd year that doesn't live up to the hype, but it really is the odd year. Entertaining game in Ottawa. Talk to me a bit about the impact that the Panda Game has on all of you sports football. And then, Dashawn, take me through the game a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that making it an event and a standalone event, right? Like they had the game played on Sunday as a standalone Canadian football event for the most part. I know the RSCQ usually has a Sunday game. I don't recall if they did this week. I'm sure they probably did. But in the OUA, everybody else played the day before. In the CFL, well, the Red Blacks actually happened to have this week off, but everybody else had played already. So this was very much the standalone showcase event. There was no real reason for students and the general public not to engross themselves in this game and take part in the event. And we know that they've well established that this is a real centerpiece of the calendar all fall. Both schools build it up. Both schools are equally enthusiastic about it. Both schools do a great job of making sure they split that crowd pretty much right down the middle and make it a true neutral site rivalry game. Everything about it is great, all the way down to the fact that both schools are always close enough to each other in caliber that they seem to come right down to the wire every single year, like it's scripted almost. To be clear, I'm not suggesting it is, but that's a big element of the same thing too. So they've kind of got this perfect storm going on here. But what's been nice about it, I think, as we alluded to a little bit last week on the show, is that other schools and markets around the country are taking notice of this, and they are not just, as it felt like they were doing for the first 5 years or so, writing it off as, well, this is a perfect storm and not something we can duplicate. They are trying to take those shots and duplicate it and draw up that attention, and I think things are moving in the right direction that way.
Yeah, and Jim, you kind of said it yourself. You spoke about the actual game. Another instant classic, right? Who would have ever thought two and four teams in the final weeks of the OUA would give us another instant classic? But it was a great game. Carleton looking to really snap a 5 Panda Game losing streak, and they came close. They found themselves up 21-8 at halftime behind an amazing first half by Elijah Barnes. But this veteran Ottawa team that's really been together for the core of around 3 or 4 years really found their groove in the second half. You saw big plays by Josh Jansen, the quarterback, big plays by Charles Asselen, who's amongst one of the best rushers in the nation right now. And then on the defense, they really were able to tighten up and score around 20 unanswered points in the third and fourth quarter. Carleton came close in the end. Elijah Barnes came with a Hail Mary touchdown to really bring the Carleton Ravens within 3 in the final minute, but it seemed like there was some mismanagement there after they were able to recover the onside kick, weren't able to make good and, tie the game at least, win the game, and Ottawa was able to escape with another one. That's 6 straight Panda Game wins in a row for the Ottawa GGs. You might want to call that a dynasty.
Well, the Manitoba Bisons couldn't make it 6 straight wins in a row this year. They were upended by Saskatchewan. I'll throw it to you first, Gord. Is it much of a surprise? We saw the weaknesses in this Bison squad. We didn't think that they could run the table in the regular season, did we?
No, and I don't want to make this as much about the Bison specifically as just about the Canada West in general, right? And I don't want to step too much on our toes from last week's program, but the nature of the Canada West is that it is competitive from top to bottom, that there are no weeks off on the schedule, and that every game is close. And for the most part, it's not like Manitoba was blowing the doors off of people through that 5-0 start. It was they were on the right side of a lot of one-score tight games, and in some cases, some games that maybe even they benefited from a crucial call to win a game, right? So you always knew that Manitoba wasn't necessarily pulling themselves away from the pack, but they just happened to be on the right side of that variance more often than not. And of course, give them enough credit, like full credit, they were good enough to make sure that they were in those positions week after week after week. And frankly, they were at the tail end of this game as well, but Saskatchewan holds off and does the best that it can. And again, we talked about this with Guelph before. I think there's a similar dynamic emerging around Sask, which is that they're starting to get healthier, and they're starting to get their feet underneath them a little bit here. And this is a team that started real slow this season, but we always knew the talent was there. And now all of a sudden that talent's starting to show a little bit, and they're looking like a scary out, a tough out in the Canada West playoffs, wherever it is they may fall.
Who's more scarier, Dashawn? Is it Saskatchewan or UBC at this stage? Because UBC avenged their opening season loss against Alberta, although they faced an Alberta team without Eli Hetlinger at quarterback.
I would say it's the UBC Thunderbirds, and the reason why I'd say that is because they came close to winning a Vanier Cup last year. They're the defending conference champions. A veteran group, again, that's been together for 4 years, have grown together for 4 years, and really and truly their minds are set on running the table again in this conference and going back to back and getting back to a Vanier Cup. But the Saskatchewan Huskies are an amazing football team, and what we've seen from this team over the last 2 seasons is really a tale of how well can they take care of the ball. If they can take care of the ball, if Anton Amru can avoid throwing interceptions, this is a really good football team. Riker Frank is having an all-Canadian type of year out the backfield, and he's rushing for over 100, 130 in every single game and putting this team on his back. Daniel Weeb is breaking off 80-plus yard touchdowns on a weekly basis. This is a dangerous, explosive football team, really showing shades of the teams that went to Vanier Cups in the early 2020s behind Mason Nias. So the Saskatchewan Huskies are an amazing football team, but I would say given the consistency of what we've seen from the UBC Thunderbirds over the last number of seasons, given that they're coming off of going to a Vanier Cup last year and trying to get back there, I would say the UBC Thunderbirds are the more dangerous team, but Saskatchewan is not far behind.
Are the Montreal Carabins just waiting for their next game against Laval to try to show us who the real Carabins are? Because they were certainly sleepwalking through their first 30 minutes against McGill earlier this week. What are your thoughts on that, Gord?
In a word, yes. And I mean, I think I've touched on this a couple times this season. Like, it does feel like something's missing with the Carabin so far this season. Jonathan Senecal has come nowhere near recreating the magic of his Het Crichton campaign from a year ago. He has been good, don't get me wrong, but it's just not quite been the same for a team that last year, from beginning to end, it felt like they were out there to prove a point every weekend, every game out. And this year, it feels like they're kind of like, well, all this is going to really get down to is us figuring out how to get Laval back because they beat us early in the season. Or even giving vibes of like, oh, well, I guess we're finishing second this year instead of first, and we'll figure out how to get them in the playoffs. Who cares, right? And this is the unfortunate thing about the RCQ right now, is that they can't afford to sleepwalk through the first half against the other 3 teams in the conference and still pull it out of the fire fairly comfortably in the end. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to speculate from the outside as to what's going on within that program, but it does feel like they're kind of experiencing a little bit of a hangover from what was a really good season last year for them on the whole, and one where they're struggling to kind of get the intensity and the passion back up to that 11 out of 10 level that they had a year ago.
Dashawn, do you sense a malaise out of this team, or do you think we'll see the real Carabin when the weather starts turning a little colder?
Really and truly, we got to take into consideration that the 2023 Montreal Carabins were a historically great team. I don't know where the U Sports football record book is, but if we find it one day and we were able to look at it and maybe update it, you'd find the Montreal Carabins defense from 2023 to be one of the greatest defenses of all time, along with the 2023 Windsor Lancers. And of course, you got to take into consideration what Jonathan Senecal did last season was amazing, given that he didn't have a rush game. He was the team's leading rusher because Bertrand Beaulieu had retired from the season prior. And also their top target, Hussein Dosso, had actually gone down as well. So Jonathan Senecal also had a historically great season, but there was a lot of urgency behind it because he was missing a lot of targets that had either retired or graduated or had gone down during the season. it's hard to replicate that. It's extremely hard to replicate greatness in back-to-back seasons. This is still a great football team. They're bringing back a lot of the same players on both sides of the ball, on offense, on defense. Of course, they got Senecal on defense. They still got Jeremiah Ojo, who's an All-Canadian, who's having an amazing season right now as a defensive lineman. And they also still got Harold Miasen, who's the defending President's Trophy winner. So this is still a great football team, bringing back majority of the same coaching staff. I think for them, it's really going to come down to, again, that second matchup against the Laval Rouge et Or, and again, how they close out the season and head into the playoffs. They're trying to go back-to-back. They understand it's going to be a long season, and they understand if they win the Dunsmore Cup, you got to make that travel across to Canada West and face a really good Canada West team. So I think what they're really trying to do right now is find their groove. No need to hit the panic button, but there's still time to find that greatness that they might have unlocked last season. But I don't think it's time to hit the panic button just yet.
Quickly, Gord, I would suggest that the game that they might be focused on isn't the second game against Laval. It's probably the third game against Laval.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I was trying to allude to there when I said, like, ultimately it's about getting Laval in November. We're talking Dunsmore Cup at that point in time. And I would agree with you. Now, I don't think, to be very clear, I don't think that they want to go into that having lost both to Laval, especially since the rematch will come back at Montreal. But I agree. Like, ultimately, it's for that Dunsmore Cup. And as Dashawn alluded to, of course, then it's about the next step after that, knowing that they don't have an easy path to the Vanier Cup this year either. So I do think that for both these teams, to be fair, this is also true of Laval, but for both these teams, their eyes very much forward right now on what looms for them in the month of November to get to where they ultimately want to be.
Guys, thanks very much for this. When we come back, we will talk to Nolan Ulm of the Eastern Washington Eagles. Stick around. Welcome back, everyone. Nolan Ulm is an outstanding receiver with the Eastern Washington Eagles. He hails from Kelowna, British Columbia, and is in his senior year. He wants to find a path to the National Football League or the next level. Let's see what he has to say. And Nolan, welcome to Gridiron Nation on TSN. Nice to see you again, by the way.
Yeah, great to see you too, Jim.
So, yeah, you just came out of a lift and some training this morning. It's been a frustrating year for you, to say the least, in terms of injuries and recovery. Can you bring everybody up to speed on what your status is these days?
Yeah. So I'm in my senior year now here at Eastern Washington University, and like I was saying to you before we hopped on here, first game, we had a really good first game versus Monmouth. And I got a little rolled up on in the first game. Thought really nothing of it, and then it just was this ankle issue. Eventually got an MRI, and it was a high ankle sprain, which we all know, with NFL guys, we see them dealing with it. It lingers quite a bit. So been grinding to get back and help my team as soon as possible, and I was able to suit up and play last game versus Montana, probably at about 80%. But anything that I could do to help the team and just being out there, even if I'm not catching a ton of passes, it really opens up the field. And because that's my thing. I'm a deep threat, and I stretch the field for our offense. So it was really, really good to be out there. And then we just finished up our bye week. So turning the corner with the ankle, and looking forward to, 7 games left in my senior year to go show all the work that I've been putting in up to this point.
Now, it is your senior year. Is there any chance with your eligibility, if you wanted to come back for a year, that you could get another one? Because we know that those things have been in flux ever since coming off of the pandemic. Is there any flexibility there?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I have a red shirt, and then I could medical too, since there's an MRI behind it. Because COVID, it was a free year, so I didn't redshirt as a freshman. I played as a freshman, true freshman. So I definitely could come back. I'm hoping that I don't have to. I'm really looking forward to going to the next level and just taking that next step. Lord willing, everything goes according to plan these last 7.
Talk to me what it's like to be a guy that comes from the interior of BC to a community on the other side of the border that's geographically connected, but may have those cultural differences that really stand out. What are the differences that you've absorbed in a true college town in central Washington state?
Yeah, that's really interesting you mentioned that, because a lot of people forget that I'm from Canada down here because it is so similar, and I fit in pretty well compared to other international students. But I am on a student visa, right? I'm an alien down here technically, and it's been really interesting, especially for me being able to be outside looking in. It makes me realize how much some of these bigger cultural forces are in play, like just with decisions. Like a small example, I was just talking to someone about this. The guys on the team down here get married a lot quicker than the guys up in Canada. Just things like that. It's been really eye-opening and allowed me to really grow as a human, not only as a football player, just being able to be in this different environment, all these guys from different walks of life. And that's what I love about football. And I know it's the same in every single other locker room, especially the higher up you go, is you've got guys from all over the place. We got guys from Texas. We got guys from, LA. We got guys from the west side of Washington, guys that are from Spokane, right? 20 minutes away. And it's just beautiful to be able to have these conversations that you probably wouldn't otherwise have, right? With all these different backgrounds. And especially for me being from Canada, it's been, I didn't get those conversations in Kelowna. I'll just leave it at that. So it's been incredible.
We had Keelan White on the show about 2 weeks ago. Great picture of the two of you after that game, by the way. It was nice to see Canada in the house there. You were talking about playing in the Big Sky and what kind of brand of football it is. It seems that it's tailor-made for a deep threat like yourself. Did that weigh into your decision-making? Because it's so entertaining in that conference. And unfortunately, because it's FCS, not enough Canadians actually get to see it.
Yeah, it definitely was a huge factor in my decision, especially Eastern Washington with the guys that have come through here, Cooper Kupp, Kendrick Bourne, Simba Webster. I could go on and on of legends that played the receiver position and the quarterback position, right? There was a time there were 3 of the 8 quarterbacks in the CFL were all Eastern guys. So and especially being in the Big Sky as well, it is a passing league, like you said. And that's what I came for, was the air raid, was the production, and then also just being able to really impact and help my team win the game through the air. So it was a huge decision, and especially the competitiveness too. Not only the passing, but the Big Sky is incredible what it's turned into, where it's any given Saturday for any team, and the level of players you get to play against. I could go down the line of guys that I've been able to play against that are playing on Sundays now. Not just on the roster, they're playing on Sundays now. And so it's not just Eastern, it's all the teams. And like you said, the fast pace, and how we are, no huddle, I love that so much. It's just more fun as a receiver, because not only do we get to block and do those things too, but when you go fast, everything else just kind of opens up with it too.
You said 7 games to go. Is there a path for you guys to win the Big Sky Championship? And how many teams in the Big Sky actually still have a path?
Yeah, everyone basically. If we win out, it's definitely there. We just lost to Montana by a score, really, really close game there. But they just lost to Weber this past weekend. So the only team that we don't have on our schedule is Weber. So if Weber were to lose and we won out, then we'd be a Big Sky champion. So we've got a lot of the really good teams on the horizon too. Like I said, everybody is a really good team, but especially, circling those Idaho, going to the Kibbe Dome, and then Montana State, some of those games, which will be really critical for us to capitalize on. We know we have a really good team here, a really good team. We just got to put it all together, and it really is one game at a time. Like I said, each week is a new week, and if we do take care of business, it is crazy, right? Being 1-4, you still have everything in front of you that, the goals were at the beginning of the season.
You talked a few minutes ago about connecting with people and their life experiences, and a broad set of life experiences. It seems that with your camp that you run up in Kelowna on an annual basis, the people that you bring together for that camp also have a broad set of life experiences. Is that part of a theme for you personally in terms of a path of discovery? And what do you get out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's totally a huge path for me. I mean, that's why I have my podcast too. It really is just an excuse to talk to incredible people. The camp is really phenomenal because it takes a special guy to fly out, and especially if it's an NFL guy or a former NFL guy, someone that they get a lot of opportunities all the time, that they want to fly out on their time and come impact kids' lives. And that says a lot about who they are. That's really who I am. I am who I am because of other people. I can't take credit for much. I've been blessed to be around incredible people, starting back, with former CFL player who is from Kelowna, Jared Zaleski, and he changed my life by really being a big brother to me and showing me the way. And then it's just been more and more people along the journey. And even to your question earlier, the reason I chose Eastern was all those things, and then also who the receiver coach was here at the time, Pat McCann, who's the offensive coordinator at Fresno. I mean, he changed my life, and his mentorship, his belief, his skill set, that's what I came for. And the things that he said today, I still carry now. And so I'm always looking for, I don't want to be the biggest fish in the room. I want to get into rooms where I'm at the bottom, because that's super exciting for me. It means I have so much to grow, learn, and that's how you do become the best version of yourself, right? Is constantly challenging yourself. So that's what I love even right now. There's the receiver in my class, Efton Chisholm III. He's projected first team All-American. And so coming in and being able to play and be in the same class as him, and we compete a lot. So that's what I really believe. I believe that, we shape each other as people, and that it's all about who you're around every single day, because the standard of your peer group is going to be your standard. So I'm always looking to raise that.
You talk about personal development. What about athletic development at Eastern on your path? What kind of athlete were you coming in to the program? I mean, I remember seeing you with Team BC, where you were clearly head and shoulders above most of the athletes at that Canada Cup, quite frankly. And where are you now in terms of being an athlete? And where do you want to go after this in terms of further development?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I got to Eastern, I was really raw, really, really raw. Definitely Canada Cup, some of those tournaments where there were some really good players there. I could get away with just straight athletic ability, and I could do, one-dimensional things. I could go up for a ball and run past people and be big and strong and physical. And then I got here and everybody was big and strong and physical, and they had been training for 4 or 5 years more than me, right? Weight room, practice. And it was a wake-up call for me. It wasn't all horrible. I mean, I played as a true freshman. My expectation, though, was I was going to come in and break all of Cooper Kupp's records. Like, you shoot for the stars, and then I was really looking to do that. But I just didn't really know how to play receiver, and that's where Pat McCann came in. I'm a completely different person from that freshman year, and my whole goal was I really didn't care about the results immediately. I was so focused on who I was becoming and prepping for this senior year that I'm in right now to be the best that I could be. And even now, like every single day, I'm looking to get 1% better. Everyone says that, but I really mean that, because that compounds on itself. So yeah, definitely have changed a lot. My skill set, I am confident I can play anywhere on the field. You give me man coverage, I will win every single time. You can pick the route. And that's just from the standard that these guys set before us. I mean, I've watched so much film. All I do is eat, breathe, and sleep football. And it was always about, I wanted to fail fast, and find my failures, because that's what allowed me to create drills or go ask this person, how do you get better at this? Or mentally, like, I'm having trouble with this. Like, all those, there's always an answer if you're if you're resourceful enough. And that's what I think. A lot of people point to resources, but it's all about your inner resourcefulness. So I just want to keep that going. And my goal is playing the NFL. I want to be around the best, especially I know that I'll be able to crack the roster because I take the same approach to special teams. And that's really, really important to me. And I know that the technique and the skill set is what allows you to stand out. So I just want to keep being the best version of myself and get around other world-class individuals that are striving for the same thing.
When you're in a camp and you're talking to 14, 15, or 16-year-old versions of yourself, and you're trying to talk about process, and you're dealing with impatient young guys, how do you sell that process to them?
Yeah, that's always the challenge, especially in this culture. It wasn't even like this when I was in high school. It's so much of just a results-based thinking, like you're saying. And I think the best way to get them out of that is to get them to widen their time horizon a little bit. Everyone is so, worked up with this week today. They're just looking to make themselves feel good in this moment, as a blanket statement. And a lot of people are like that. A lot of athletes are like that. And that's just like with social media and unfortunately, the way it is. And if you can really get them detached from that and really see their life as being this journey that they get to make of it, like what they want to make of it. And it's no one else's fault. It's their life and they need to take ownership of it. And then if you can just get them to the gym for a couple days, a week, a month, and they start to see the results, that's where I think it really, really takes off, because you become addicted to that. And when these guys who are maybe low on self-esteem or they're not where they want to be, they work hard and they see that hard work works, right? That's what Manny Arsenault says. Hard work works. Once they see that, then it's just a chain reaction, and eventually it becomes who they are. And so that's really what the goal is, right? It's what is their identity, and getting them to really see themselves as a hard worker, being the hardest worker in the room. That will stick with them, not only in football, but, as a dad, as a brother, a son, all those things. So
you put in the hard work, and you're going through a bit of adversity at the start of this season. You got 7 games left. What do you think that you still need to do over those 7 games to prove whomever's looking at you at the next level that you deserve that shot at the next level?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love that this adversity happened. It's such a blessing because I talk about all this stuff, right? I talk about pushing through, about being the change, making it happen. And now I really get to show like what happens when, this is everything that I've worked for. And I didn't get to play versus Nevada. I didn't get to play versus these teams where the Chargers were there watching, or we have a new NFL scout coming every other practice, and I can't practice in front of them right now, Not that that's what they really care about. They just want to see us, but it's all these things that I could buy into when really it comes back to what do I have control over. And so these next 7 games, I got to go produce. I got to just go step up and be the team captain and leader of this team that I am. And just go dominate one play at a time, 6 seconds, snap to whistle, and then every single moment, right? Like right as soon as this is over, I'm going to go to the training room, keep working on my body, and just really being able to look back that like I maximized every single second, and that those people that are watching will see what they need to see if I do that.
Well, we have to maximize every single second in this interview. You mentioned your podcast. Here's a chance to plug your podcast.
Yeah, the Make It Happen podcast. That was the first thing that I really branched out of football and really wanted to start making a difference in other people's lives. And, I started that, and it was just solo episodes. And then I was able to get, guys like Kendrick Bourne, Patriots receiver and different people like that. And really the whole purpose of that is just to, document my journey of ultimately I want to impact 1 billion people in my life. It's a lot, I know. But after football, like football is it's going to be a very small part of my life, and it's initially this vehicle that has allowed me to grow. But I just can't wait to go and get out there and impact people. And so one way I can do that is with this podcast. So it's all sorts of strategies, tools to better your life, and interviews with people that have reached mastery. And then me just decoding that as someone who's looking to reach that as well.
Nolan, thanks very much for this. We appreciate your time.
Of course. Thanks, Jim.
When we come back, Games of the Week. Final segment on the nation. Let's go to Games of the Week. Is it a UNLV update week, or are you going to skip them this week, Gord?
No, I've been told that's on the banned word list for me this week. I'm going to go to Arizona at BYU. And this is a really tight line. I've seen lines anywhere from a pick'em to BYU favored by a field goal. So we're looking at a tight line here. BYU hosting this game. And Arizona has proven to be a bit of a mercurial and interesting team this season. They have looked very good in a couple of key wins. Tateroa McMillan is going to be a lottery pick in the NFL draft this year. He is a stud. There's some serious talent there that did not leave when Jed Fish left after last season and stuck around. Brent Brennan has come in and done a pretty good job with them. However, they had a weird hiccup at home against Texas Tech last week that kind of took the wind out of their sails almost entirely here. So the long and the short of Arizona is you don't really know what to make of them at this point in time. I think they're good, but I don't know. And contributing on the Arizona team, by the way, I should point out is Leif Magnuson, Saskatchewan native on the offensive line. He should be playing some guard for them. And then on the BYU side, Isaiah Banyo, one of our left bridge guys, continues to hold it down as a rotational pass rusher for the Cougars. Cougars have had a very good start to the season, on the fringes of the top 25 for the last couple of weeks. I believe they're actually in it currently. And so this is a good team on the other side as well. And Provo, by the way, in my opinion, one of the more underrated environments in college football as well to play in. So this should be a really good one. That'll be at 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern Saturday kick. And then we're going to go real sicko mode for the real degenerates out there. And I'm going to go to an 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern kickoff, which is Boise State traveling to Hawaii. And I love when Hawaii hosts games on college football Saturdays because as I'm late in the evening, even on the Pacific Coast here, I got something on the go that's live, and it is great. But what we want to watch here is Boise State coming in. We've talked a lot about Ty Benefield on this program. He had another really strong week last week. Didn't rack up a huge tackle number, but he did recover a fumble in that game. But the guy I want to talk about here is Ashton Jeanty, because if you don't know this name and you call yourself a college football fan, you need to change that yesterday. This guy is having an incredible start to the season. He's already gone over 1,000 yards rushing in his first 5 games. He is on pace in most major categories to be close to or break some of Barry Sanders' single-season rushing records in the NCAA. This is truly historic what Jeanty is doing, and it is very cool for me in the era of NIL and the era of guys constantly looking to find the next rung up the ladder that Jeanty has stayed at Boise State and has said outright, I could have made a ton of money to go elsewhere, but I think it's much more important and much cooler to leave a legacy where I am, and leave a legacy you're going to do, young man. So I would love to watch that game and focus on him on offense when Boise has the ball, and Nick Senecal and Ty Benefield when Boise doesn't have the ball, because let's not forget Senecal on the Hawaii side as well. So some good stuff to watch for in that one if you are a night owl and willing to stay up to pay the price for it.
Or if you live in the Pacific time zone like both of us do. For everyone here on Gridiron Nation, this is Jim Mullin saying, let's get out to the game.